Or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. I am beginning 5 minutes late, and I apologize for that. It will not happen again. I thought that I would start by talking about mean girls. Mean girls in journalism. Mean girls in society, because it seems that we're governed by mean girls now. I've talked many times about how journalism has changed, that journalism is now a female-dominated profession, and it has become feminist, matriarchal, and, well, snarky, I suppose, is the best word to describe it. Journalism and our larger culture is all about slights and avenging slights. No matter whether they are real or imagined. That Karen is determined that no one is going to get the better of her. You think you're the boss of me? Karen says no. Karen is the boss. A remarkable story appeared 2 days ago in the Washington Post. And remember, democracy dies in darkness. And it is called Blackface Incident at Post-Cartoonist 2018 Halloween Party Resurfaces Amid Protests. Oh, it resurfaces, did it? Or does someone decide to resurf it? And it's by two people, Mark Fisher. Now, I'm assuming that Mark is a man. Actually, I'm looking at a picture of him. Wow, he looks like he's in his 50s. And he's writing this juvenile trivia. And Sydney Trent, who is a woman who appears to be in her 40s. This is the sort of thing that journalists get upset about. Every year, Tom Toll's Halloween party draws an eclectic mix. Journalists and political types from Washington's power elite, but also artists and musicians, everyone from retirees to college kids, jammed into small rooms and sprawled across the backyard, dancing and gossiping, checking out the crowd to see who has the most inventive and outrageous costumes. Outrageous, I hope. No, but wait. At the 2018 party at the home of the Washington Post's editorial cartoonist, in addition to several Ruth Bader Ginsburgs, someone dressed as the Mueller witch hunt and Post columnist Dana Milbank came as just confirmed Supreme Court Justice Brett M. Kavanaugh, complete with a beer dispensing device on his head. A guest named Lexi Gruber wore a scary Beetlejuice getup and called herself dead. A middle-aged white woman, ooh, white, I don't like where this story is going, named Sue Schaefer, won a conservative business suit and a name tag that said, "Hello, my name is Megan Kelly." Her face was almost entirely blackened with makeup. Kelly, then an NBC morning show host, had just that week caused a stir by defending the use of blackface by white people. Quote, "When I was a kid, that was okay as long as you were dressing up as like a character," unquote. So just before heading to the party, Schaefer, a graphic designer and friend of Toll's, decided to dress as Kelly in blackface to mock her, she said. Some of the approximately 100 guests at the home of the cartoonist in the district's American University Park neighborhood said they didn't notice the blackface. Some noticed it and said nothing. Those terrible people. No justice, no peace. A few people walked up to Schaefer, who was then 54, and challenged her about her costume. Gruber, who is of Puerto Rican descent, and her friend Lyric Prince, who is African American. Imagine going through life being called Lyric Prince. They confronted Schaefer directly. "You understand how offensive that could be to a person of color?" Gruber said, according to two witnesses. Now, I'm a little confused about this because I was just informed within the last week that person of color is now an unacceptable phrase. If you want to say black, don't use person of color. You are, how would I say, othering. It's not quite othering black people. It's more eliminating them, apparently, by using the phrase people of color. "I'm Megan Kelly. It's funny," Schaefer replied. The witnesses said. Witnesses. Like, what is this, a trial? Well, I guess it is in a way, a trial. Nearly 2 years later, the incident, which has bothered some people ever since, but which many guests remember only barely or not at all, like most things that happen in life, has surfaced in the nationwide reckoning over race after George Floyd, an unarmed African-American man, was killed when a white police officer in Minneapolis knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. So I guess if you want to settle some score with some 54-year-old graphic designer, you just bring George Floyd's name into it. And that will put it in the proper context. Gruber felt compelled to revive the 2018 incident. Oh, I see. She felt compelled. Did she? How? Last week, she emailed Tolles, whom she has never met. Perhaps it would be a good idea in the future not to invite people or not to allow people to your parties whom you have never met. In 2018, I attended a Halloween party at your home, she wrote. I understand that you are not responsible for the behavior of your guests, but at the party, a woman was in blackface, and blackface is capitalized. So not only black has to be capitalized now, but all usage thereof has to be capitalized. She harassed me and my friend, the only two women of color, and it was clear she made her costume with racist intent. Oh, I see. So dressing in a way that a black person doesn't like or a Puerto Rican person doesn't like now constitutes harassment. Gruber, a 27-year-old management consultant, told Tolles that the incident had weighed heavily on my heart. It was abhorrent and egregious. She asked him to help her identify the women. After the killing of George Floyd and the protests, I began reflecting more on this incident, Gruber said in an email seeking post-coverage of the incident. Oh, so she's just a snitch then. Something happened at a party 2 years ago that she didn't like. And she thought, well, the Washington Post will pounce on this. And guess what? They did. I wanted to know who this woman is. What impact does she have on society? I think this is an important story, that a party full of prominent people in Washington welcomed a person in blackface, danced and drank with her, and watched in silence as she harassed two young women of color, again with the harassment. Prince, Lyric Prince, 36, a science writer, art critic, and artist. Okay, what's her daytime job? Wants Schaefer to explain publicly why she did what she did. I don't want an apology because that time is long past, she said. And she wants Tolles to make it clear publicly, quote, that what Schaefer did was wrong and that that's not kind of the person that he knows to be a good person, unquote. Perhaps most of all, she said, I want people who read this story to say to themselves, I cannot excuse my friend's bad behavior because it does reflect on me if I say nothing. Looking back, some guests at the party say they wish they had confronted Schaefer more aggressively. Others say she has already paid a price. Well, I guess after this Washington Post article, she certainly paid a price. And that her embarrassment and regret were evident when she left the party in tears. So it would appear that some person or people were harassing her at the party. I wish I'd been the one to call her out, said Philippa Hughes, a Washington arts entrepreneur who attended the party. Hughes, who is Asian American, is friendly with both Gruber and Schaefer. I did go up to Sue and say, what the hell? But it took Lexi yelling at her to make her leave. Oh, no, something else is getting clearer. So apparently this woman paid a price on the day because an extremely rude person decided to scream at a stranger because of her choice of costume. Despite her certainty that wearing blackface was wrong, even as a satire aimed at Kelly's embrace of a racist gesture, Hughes is torn about whether the incident should be reopened. Well, then why are you talking about it? When it becomes public, it will become too much of a punishment, she said. It's unfair to go back and attack some clueless woman because she's not a public person, and she was punished then by Lexi, by people who chastised her afterward, by Tom. But on the other hand, people do need to be held up as an example of the lines we're going to draw about what's acceptable behavior. Every single person at that party should have said something to her. There's culpability all around. You know, Peter Simple the British satirist invented a character, Dr. Heinz Kiosk, whose catchphrase was, "We are all guilty." And this was thought to be highly satirical back in the 60s, but now this Stalinist reality has come true. Tolles, a 68-year-old Pulitzer Prize winner whose cartoons playfully and often bitingly express a decidedly liberal perspective, replied to Gruber's email last week with apologies for your experience at the party. A lot of people show up who I don't know, and I don't recognize the woman you're inquiring about. Tolles did not tell Gruber who had worn blackface, but Tolles did know Schaefer, who had been to his parties before and is a friend of his family. Oh, I guess that's what they call guilt by association. When he denied to Gruber that he recognized Schaefer, Tolles said in an interview Sunday night, "I meant that I didn't recognize any bad intent. I didn't feel it was my place to tell her who my other guest was when she had misinterpreted what the other guest intended with her costume." Imagine being in a situation where you're a 68-year-old man and you're a Pulitzer Prize winner, and you have to explain yourself to inquisitors about a costume that was worn by someone at a party you had thrown 2 years earlier. She explained to me very quickly when she came in that she was trying to show what a jerk Megyn Kelly was, Tolles recalled. I told her this was an ill-considered attempt at satire. She went on and on about what a horror it was to find something to use as blackface. She told me that in the cab on the way over with the black cab driver, he was upset. And then she explained what her costume was, and then he wasn't upset. Later in the interview, Tolles said he was not certain that he had told Schaefer at the party what he thought of her costume. I may have told her that wearing blackface wasn't appropriate, but I'm not sure I did, and maybe I should have. I could have told her to leave. I didn't, and that's on me. Maybe I should have. Tolles' boss. Oh, it's reached his boss now, has it? Post editorial page editor Fred Hyatt said, quote, "Blackface is abhorrent, period. I know Tom feels the same way. I know he wishes he had made that clearer to the person who came to his party wearing an offensive costume, and I'm glad he has apologized," unquote. The Post editorial and opinion pages are administered through a separate chain of command from the paper's news operation, which is run by executive editor Martin Barron. All this talk about chain of command suggests that there is a purge underway at the Washington Post. In addition to Tolles and his wife Gretchen, another couple, Steve Rocklin and Christina Sevilla, co-hosted the Halloween party. Rocklin, a consultant on environmental sustainability, don't any of these people have normal jobs? Said that when he saw Schaefer, my reaction was, what the hell? I asked her why she was in that costume. She explained she was being Megyn Kelly. Rocklin said he told Schaefer, whatever you're trying to do, it's offensive. And I said, I'd like you to wash that off or go. She looked stricken, almost starting to tear up. Shortly after I spoke to her, she left. Earlier that evening, as they got ready for the party, Gruber and Prince had talked about the Kelly controversy and asked about what might happen if someone showed it up in blackface. They agreed that no one would ever do that, Gruber recalled in an interview. But about 15 minutes after Gruber got to the party, she said, 15 minutes, maybe there'll be a timeline here, a minute-by-minute timeline of everything that happened the day of Tom Tolles' Halloween party, which will be added to the annals of American horror. But about 15 minutes after Gruber got to the party, she saw Schaefer in blackface in Tolles' backyard. I thought, there's just no way, Gruber recalled. I'd never seen someone in blackface before. It was like, holy shit, this is for real. Benjamin Ross, a video company executive who attended the party as a friend of Gruber, Prince, and another woman said, we had a record scratch kind of moment, like, is there a frigging woman in blackface here? Gruber said that she and Prince were among only a handful of people of color at the party. Come on, Tom Tolles. You need to get more inclusive with your friendship. Okay? So there were only a handful of people of color at the party, and that most of the guests were considerably older. Boo, old people. Lyric and I felt very out of place. She said, then why didn't you leave? Why did you even go to this party. She resolved to remain quiet about the woman. How noble. I said, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to ruin my night, but you ruined her night. But then Gruber and her friends moved inside, got drinks, and found themselves in the crowded living room. Prince, who is 6'1", easily spotted the woman in blackface and pointed her out to Gruber. What should we do? Prince said. She approached Schaefer. Prince said that she criticized Schaefer's makeup and told her, you look horrible. A way of clapping back at the blackface without addressing race head on. Prince said in an interview that she was worried about being stereotyped as an angry black woman. Golly, how would she ever have worried about angry black woman? Lyric Prince, 6'1", Lyric Prince, who confronts strangers at parties because of their costume? That's not an angry black woman. That's a righteous black woman. I felt very unsafe talking to that person in the first place. You're the one who's 6'1", sweetie. I was in an environment that, if it got heated, it would decidedly not be in my best interest. So here we have a woman who's 6'1", who picks a fight with a much smaller woman who is twice her age, but she's the one who feels unsafe. Another guest who spoke on the condition of anonymity to protect friendships said Schaefer laughed after Prince said her makeup was very ugly. Gruber also said that the woman basically just started laughing. Schaefer agreed that she laughed, but said it was a nervous laugh, a sign of extreme discomfort, and that it came only when she told me that I was ugly and had wrinkles. She told me, you think you're so meta, and I didn't say anything. I didn't argue with her. Prince said of Schaefer, she looked very proud of herself, as if she was eliciting the kind of response that she had been hoping for. Prince viewed the blackface not as a satire aimed at Kelly, but rather as the opposite, as a mockery of the outrage that Megyn Kelly produced, now who's being mega Lyric Prince. I find it very hard to believe that a white person does not know blackface is offensive. That was the whole point of blackface to begin with, to mock black people. After Prince confronted Schaefer, Gruber felt that she had to say something more direct. You notice, like, this is being reported like an incident in which someone was shot to death? How much detail do we need in this story? Well, we're going to get some more, because this is the Washington Post. Gruber asked Schaefer whether she knew the history of blackface. People have been murdered, she recalled saying. What? What? So people did their minstrel shows on the stage and what, they were shot to death? People have been murdered, she recalled saying. She said she addressed Schaefer calmly and politely. They lynched people back in the day. There's a painful history, and you should have some respect for that. Okay. Ross, who is white, boo, white, who was standing next to the woman, said Gruber's methodical explanation of the immorality of blackface was beautiful, very respectful. And the woman just laughed at Lexi, very denigrating and flippant. She was not at all apologetic. 3 witnesses described Gruber as yelling at Schaefer, and Gruber said there wasn't a single person in that party who didn't hear me when I spoke. Gruber and her friends left the party immediately after the confrontation. This was a room full of elite somebodies, and nobody wanted to touch this, Ross said. Nobody asked the woman to take off the costume. She wasn't asked to leave. There was just silence. We felt like we had to leave. Gruber said she burst into tears as soon as she left Toll's house. Prince said, I was pretty much just in a state of, shock. Schaefer said that after the confrontation, she walked in the next room, tried dancing, and it just didn't feel right, so I left. She didn't want a cab driver to see her in blackface, so she had her cousin, who was at the party, drive her home. Schaefer said she realized from the moment she entered Toll's house that she'd made a terrible mistake. The next day, she called Toll's with absolute remorse about the costume, extremely upset on reflection and apologetic, Toll said. She did not come with the intent to confront, embarrass, ridicule, or insult anybody. Toll said Sunday night that he feels terrible that Gruber had such a bad experience. But I know Schaefer felt so terrible that I don't feel comfortable dragging her into a public situation that will misrepresent what she was doing. On her Facebook page, Some deep research here. Schaefer posts often about her opposition to President Trump and her support of immigrants, gun control, gay rights, and anti-racism causes, including photos she took at marches and demonstrations she attended. Schaefer said she has spent many hours in therapy talking about how carelessly I behaved. I'm deeply ashamed. Okay, so this is apology number one. How many apologies are we going to get from this poor woman? Prince, too, has sought to work through the events of the evening with a therapist. How fragile are these people? It was a humiliating experience for me, she said. I felt threatened and physically and emotionally exposed. I felt powerless in a way that I never want to feel again. Again, you're the 6'1" woman who is screaming at close range at a woman much smaller than you and twice your age. Powerless. Schaefer said she has learned in recent weeks, as protests have sparked new conversations about race, that racism runs much more deeply than I thought. I should know. I'm Jewish, and my grandmother was a child slave for 2 years. I've hung my head for months. I hurt people in my carelessness. She said she understands Gruber's and Prince's pain and their consternation and their hurt. Clearly, I didn't understand the history of Blackface enough. I failed completely, but I'm not a malicious person. Schaefer wrote an email to Tom and Gretchen Tolles the day after the party saying that she had made a huge mistake. I'm very sorry. I ruined the evening for some of your guests. She said she would like a chance to tell Gruber in person how sorry she is. Ooh, a real life struggle session. With this story, they'll get the public humiliation they want, but it won't foster any real dialogue between us. I wish they could talk to me. I made a mistake. I understand now that when Black people make a mistake, they could get killed. All this talk about murder because some woman put black cream on her face. On Wednesday, after Schaefer informed her employer, a government contractor, about the Blackface incident and the Post's forthcoming article, she was fired. Everyone involved in the incident agrees that the message Blackface sends is unmistakable. Blackface is a hard line that you never cross, said Hughes, the artist, who wrote a blog post about the incident a few days after the party without naming anyone. I can super intellectualize it to argue that what Schaefer did was satire. It's a commentary, but emotionally, I get the joke, but it's not funny. Hughes said the incident reminded me how tough and complex it is to talk about race, now more than ever. I try to have compassion for when people make mistakes like this, particularly because I know that I will make mistakes. And these days, there's so much calling out and canceling that I'm worried that progressives are actually making it harder to achieve the policy goals we want. On the other hand, I think there are lines we need to draw, and wearing blackface in 2018 under any circumstances should probably be one of them. This week, Gruber and Tolles traded emails. The exchange started promisingly. I understand that you're not responsible for the behavior of guests, Gruber wrote. Tolles replied that he was wrong to deny that he knew who was wearing blackface. I'm sorry for that and more, he wrote. He admitted that Schaefer was a friend. He said he has realized that wearing blackface was offensive in any context. I regret that I did not see that more clearly at the time, and I apologize to you now unreservedly for that. But Tolles did not give Gruber the woman's name, and Gruber reacted sharply. Hiding her name is a deliberate act of white privilege and cowardice, not friendship. In response, Tolles offered to connect Gruber with Schaefer, who he said wanted a chance to explain and apologize to you herself. Gruber replied that she has a hard time believing that you were genuine in remorse. I do not feel comfortable reaching out to a woman who publicly harassed me and my friend simply because we are not white. This happened in public, and so I want a public apology, not a private one. She told Tolles that he was not innocent in the conflict. As you well know, we are an extension of the company we keep. Yes, and two adults employed by the Washington Post came up with this Mean Girls effort. And again, their names are Mark Fisher and Sidney Trent. And you must have heard this phrase, a conversation about race. I believe some cabinet minister in Obama's government talked about this. a conversation about race, talking about race. No, there's no talking about race. There are black people and other people of color yelling at white people and demanding that they beg for their lives. Now, for all this talk about murder, no one died except this unfortunate woman, Sue Schaefer. She lost her job, and she is now hated by many people whom she has never met. Such is the way of modern journalism. So let's see some reactions to this from BizPac Review. In the Great Cultural Revolution of 2020, even attempts to mock perceived racial offenses can lead to one being canceled. As the cleansing of American society to meet the fleeting standards of the intolerant left begins in earnest, where even George Washington is no longer safe, a Halloween party from 2018 was given feature-length status by the Washington Post in an effort to shame a white woman for her racial sins. The 3,000-plus word article. I wonder if the Washington Post spends, 3,000 words on, say, the election of a Mexican president or a Canadian prime minister or some such. But a Jewish woman who made a gross faux pas at a party, that's certainly worth 3,000 words plus. And so the story here is paraphrased. But again, I'm struck by this, that Tom Tolles, and I've known of his work as a cartoonist for decades. He is often amusing. He is in big, big trouble. As Gruber says, hiding her name is a deliberate act of white privilege and cowardice, not friendship. Friendship. How can you be friends with a racist? How can you be friends with someone who I don't like? Yeah, impossible. And we have, of course, Ralph Northam of Virginia, the governor there. He got away with it. And Justin Trudeau, they just more and more pictures just kept coming out of him in blackface and him in brown face, as they call it. And he's having a whale of a time. Just to be clear, I don't give a toss. It doesn't offend me, and I don't think that is a terrible thing to do. But of course, Justin Trudeau is the wokest of the woke. And when this story was broken, shortly before the national election in Canada in October, the media rushed to defend Justin Trudeau. And nobody circles the wagons like the Canadian media. Washington Examiner executive editor Seth Mandel hit the nail on the head when he stated in a tweet, "What an utterly atrocious article in which everyone involved acknowledges that they're just out to ruin a life," and the Washington Post gleefully underwrites it. Jesse Singal wrote a 3,000-word two-byline investigation informing you that a woman you've never heard of, who is not a public figure until now, wore an offensive Halloween costume 2 years ago at a WAPO cartoonist party. Josh Barrow, who I believe writes for Fortune or Forbes, said WAPO should explain why it published a feature about an offensive costume a non-public figure wore to a private party 2 years ago, and consider an editor's note that it did not meet the paper's standards, which declares that fairness includes relevance. Yair Rosenberg wrote that this article has no reason to exist and no one involved in it comes out looking good, including the authors and publication, all of whom I respect. But perhaps it will have the unintended consequence of shocking some papers into not doing this ever again. No, I think it's going to have the opposite consequence. That you can take down nobodies now, that you can ruin the life of some woman because of an ill-considered Halloween costume 2 years ago. Patrick Gaspard wrote, was this Washington Post story intended to be a spoof of our culture? Did they really invest all this investigatory resource on this piece to shame this average person who holds no discernible power? Have we come to this? Yes. Yes, we have. And Sue Schaefer is now what they used to call in the Soviet Union a former person. And I don't think Tom Tolles is going to have his job for very long. So we'll look at the chat. I was listening to Mean Girl Claire Caw argue with Babs' mean lefty girlfriend on Luke's show, says Jonathan Paul. Okay. Let's see. Pixies over the cure. KMG's boomer takes. Well, someone asked me and I answered. The Pixies still go on tour and they still get big audiences. And there's a lot of young people in the audiences, or so I've seen in the videos. Dawn from Beyond says, I finished my DoorDash work early today. Well, I'm glad that you're here. I was being in panic there a bit while waiting for the show to start. Yeah, well, again, there's been some developments, as the dude says in the big Lebowski. Mike F says, I was once Venus Williams for Halloween, but no blackface. Did this involve wearing a fake ass? Can you even do a blackface Michael Jackson? It has to be a blackface like any credible fable, LOL, says Lecomte de Boreas. Would you say that such material is absolutely relevant to current happenings? Well, apparently there are white people being white. And that is a big news story because whiteness has to be eliminated. Mike F says, one Halloween had a friend who went as an 8-ball, face and head mostly black. Let's see. William Hicks says, I think she went up to the two ladies of color and said, so sisters, what do you think? Pretty authentic looking. Am I not? I got cred, yo. Well, Paxson says, no one expects the intersectional inquisition. Well, they should. They should. Now, we're seeing all of these liberal titans being felled now. And again, this is just like the French Revolution. Well, I never thought that it would catch up with me. You didn't? You thought that everyone else was going to get it in the neck except you? Jonathan Paul says, I was intrigued by the simultaneous appearance of Claire and Babs. Bob Paxson says, Dr. Paul is a huge Kyle fan. LOLOL. No, I don't think that's true. Well, KMG covered the Matt Gaetz review. Okay. Matt Gaetz is an American congressman. And for some reason, he announced that he has a son who is not his biological son, and he's from Haiti, and he came to America legally, presumably as an adult. I don't know. Isn't the age of emancipation 18 now? The whole thing is desperately weird. And I thought it was like those episodes of 30 Rock where we found out that Tracy Jordan has a son, Donald, who is actually older than he is. I mean, there's something going on here. I mean, one has one's suspicions, but yeah, I don't know what to say. Donald Trump, of course, is thrice married, has had numerous affairs with Playboy models and the like. But in comparison with the weirdos in the Republican Party, Trump seems resolutely normal in comparison. William Hicks and the Color Girls sing do yeah, that old Lou Reed song. Has that been banned yet? I guess it will. Chocokin 666, black girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. Very good. Very good. I like that. Manfred von Thistlebaum says, in Coming to America, Eddie Murphy was in all kinds of faces. Yes, one of the Wayans brothers going to be canceled for their grossly offensive movie, White Girls. I have not seen that movie. I saw the trailer. I saw the ads, and I saw it discussed on a movie YouTube channel. the Wayans brothers, who are made the stupid plot, they're running away from gangsters or something. So they're pretending to be white girls. They do not look white. They do not look human. All right, it's absolutely terrifying. But I don't know. Are they going to get canceled? I want everyone to be canceled. We just wipe the slate clean. You know, it's like the end of Fight Club. You know, when the big towers come down and all the credit card records are killed. You know, as I said, let's cancel everybody. Let's make it all equal. Okay, so in other cancellation news, or in near cancellation news, Jimmy Kimmel, that smarmy creep, announces summer leave amid Blackface controversy. ABC's Jimmy Kimmel on Thursday announced he will be taking the summer off after facing criticism over wearing blackface in a recurring skit he performed while working on The Man Show on Comedy Central. That was in the 1990s, was it not? There is a tweet from Daily Mail celebrity. He announces that he's taking the summer off to spend time with his family. Oh, come on. Are people still saying that? Yeah, I used to be watched by millions of people every day, and everyone knew who I was, and I got paid millions of dollars a year. But now I'm going to mope on the couch and watch Netflix, because that's obviously what any man would choose to do, right? Kimmel, as a co-host of The Man Show, performed a recurring skit that included him dressed in blackface as then NBA star Karl Malone. Videos and photos of the skits on the show, which ran from 1999 to 2004, have been circulating online recently with calls for Kimmel to apologize. And someone called Stacy on the right, yeah, I kind of getting an idea about exactly who this woman is. How about a coloring book of yourself entitled the Jimmy Kimmel Blackface Edition? I have my black crayons ready. In other words, liberals are the real racists. Doesn't Kerry Washington know that Jimmy Kimmel appeared in blackface and co-hosted a show where he harassed women? Hey, I'm just going by the Hollywood SJW rules. Tim Young, wait, so now there's outrage over Jimmy Fallon wearing blackface in one sketch 20 years ago, but still crickets from the left on Jimmy Kimmel's old recurring blackface sketch, and of course nothing on racist Ralph Northam. At least be consistent with your cancel culture. Well, it seems to be becoming more and more consistent because, you know, as I like to say, as Yagoda used to say, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. That everyone can be found guilty. I'm taking this summer off to spend even more time with my family, Kimmel said on Thursday night from his home studio. There's nothing wrong. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. I just need a couple of months off. When I'm gone, a cavalcade of very kind and capable people will be filling in for me, the 52-year-old added. I'm getting the impression that Jimmy Kimmel is never coming back from hiatus. Hiatus is it's not used in this article, but it is a deadly word in the entertainment world. The announcement from Kimmel comes after rival Tonight Show host Jimmy Fallon recently apologized for a blackface skit he did on Saturday Night Live in 2000. In 2000, while on SNL, I made a terrible decision to do an impersonation of Chris Rock while in blackface. Oh, dear. You just can't do impersonations of black people. I mean, it can't be done. Or only a black person can do it, I suppose. There is no excuse for this. I'm very sorry for making this unquestionably offensive decision. And I thank all of you for holding me accountable. Yes, he's congratulating those people responsible for his own struggle session. Kimmel is slated to host the Emmy Awards on ABC on September 20th. Not for long. Not for long. Past guest hosts for Kimmel have included former 2020 Democratic presidential hopeful Pete Buttigieg, along with actors Matt Damon, Will Arnett, Kristen Bell. This is pretty white here, Jimmy. Jennifer Lawrence, wow, she's whiter than white. Chris Pratt, and Tracy Ellis Ross. Yes, finally, a dash of inclusion, of color, of vivacity, of vibrancy. Okay, Katie Hopkins, who is a provocative English woman. You probably run into her. She's a rather brave woman, actually, but now she's been permanently removed from using Twitter. This is from the London Mirror. Her Twitter profile, which she used to tweet under the handle at KT Hopkins, now states she has been suspended, and this time it is for good, a spokesperson from the website has confirmed. The outspoken personality's microblogging account has been taken down after a petition was started by a social media user to get her booted off the site. Over 75,000 people signed their name to the change.org petition to get the former Apprentice Stars account suspended. The petition bio read, "Unbelievably, Katie Hopkins has been given a platform to assault, abuse, and cause outrage for far too long. Attacking victims of child sex exploitation is probably the most disgusting act that any human can do. Does she have no boundaries? The scary thing is, this could happen to her own children right under her nose. Being as self-obsessed as she is, how would she see the signs?" Okay, is there going to be a reference? Is there going to be an explanation of what this is actually talking about? I think it's about time Twitter took action and removed her from their platform, just as Facebook have done with Britain First. Freedom of speech is something I believe in. Freedom of hate speech isn't. I'm sure many people feel the same way. A Twitter spokesperson told the Huffington Post, "Keeping Twitter safe is a top priority for us. Abuse and hateful conduct have no place on our service, and we will continue to take action when our rules are broken. In this case, the account has been permanently suspended for violations of our hateful conduct policy." The far-right racist, what? This is a news story? The far-right racist has gained a large amount of backlash and hate over the years for the messages she sends out on the social media platform. More recently, she caused a stir by mocking the Black Lives Matter protests. On Wednesday, Hopkins tweeted, "Today is White Out Wednesday. I will shortly be posting a picture of my arse. Thank you." It came after she took aim at footballer Marcus Rashford by posting a number of jibes regarding his free school meals campaign. The Manchester United forward's efforts convinced the government to back down on their stance not to provide meals to disadvantaged children during the school holidays. Rashford himself comes from a family of 5 children and explained how his experiences of his mother struggling to put food on the table was the motivation behind his effort to help those less fortunate. But Katie was outraged by the decision, tweeting Rashford over the issue, suggesting he should pay to feed the children himself. Hopkins contacted Rashford on Twitter, writing, "Do you think women should think about how they are going to feed a child before they decide to have it? I do not want to pay to feed other people's kids. You are welcome to." It is not the first time Katie has been suspended from Twitter. In January, her 1 million follower strong Twitter account was temporarily suspended. The suspension comes because the far-right loudmouth, whose tweets have sometimes been retweeted by U.S. President Donald Trump, violated the microblogging. What's microblogging? What? Website's policy, according to Devon Live. Campaigners, including Countdown's Rachel Riley, have been lobbying the site after Hopkins continued to spread hate on the platform, which has seen her inciting racial hatred in messages directed at the rapper Stormzy. Yes, these rappers are such shy and retiring types, really incredibly sensitive. You know, they're quick. They're quick to tear up. Okay, so I thought I knew how journalism worked, all right? And this story is by Aisha Kent. Aisha. And can we get a picture of this woman? Let's take a look. Aisha. I bet she gets a lot of compliments on her name. Yeah, okay. All right. So there is an accusation in this story by a third party that Katie Hopkins had been involved in minimizing the suffering of abused children, or had mocked this. So this is going to explain what this is in reference to, what Katie Hopkins has said on Twitter that supposedly mocked the suffering of abused children. But nope. I guess we're just going to have to take it as gospel, because some angry person on Twitter makes a claim. It must be true. This is from Reuters. Sorry is not enough. I think that pretty much every news story today could have the headline, sorry is not enough. Exclusive sorry is not enough. Caribbean states say of British slavery apologies. British financial institutions that benefited from slavery, such as Lloyd's of London, should go further than saying sorry for the role in the Atlantic slave trade and atone for their sins by funding Caribbean development, the region's countries said. Give us them precious gibs. More money for them programs. More than 10 million Africans were shackled into the Atlantic slave trade by European nations between the 15th and 19th century. Those who survived the often brutal voyage ended up toiling on plantations in the Americas. You know, you keep reading this in stories, and one gets the impression that, the white people on the ship were living the life of Riley. Until the invention of the steamship, sea voyages were risky, even crossing the English Channel. Indeed, until the invention of the steamship, any man who had survived the crossing of the English Channel, which is about 25 miles, could boast of it, and they did boast of it, to their grandchildren. Now, the slaves were valuable commodities. Their value was quantified. The seamen on these voyages, well, they weren't worth much and easily replaced. So as a matter of fact, the slaves had a higher survival rate over these voyages than did the crew of the ships. Lloyd's of London Insurance apologized on Thursday for its shameful role in the 18th century Atlantic slave trade and pledged to fund opportunities for Black and ethnic minority people. What, ethnic minority people? Like what, are the Chinese people going to get some money from Lloyd's of London because of slavery? Yes, funding development at the epicenter of the slave trade. It is not enough to say sorry, said Hilary Beckles, chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, which was set up by Caribbean countries to seek reparations from former colonial powers such as the United Kingdom, France, and Portugal. I don't see France on that list. I should think these Caribbean countries should be grateful that they were colonized by Britain and not, say, France, when one considers the hellhole that Haiti was before independence and the hellhole that it has been since independence. Okay. Arnold Schwarzenegger is in the news. This is from USA Today. Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't saying hasta la vista baby to his COVID-19 mask anytime soon. This is written by Sydney Henderson. Sydney with a C. Sydney. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that journalists have to do now. California Governor Gavin Newsom issued a state order Thursday mandating citizens to wear face diapers in public places when social distancing isn't possible to slow the spread of coronavirus. Newsom's requirement exempts young children, the hearing impaired. Do the masks cover the ears? And those with medical conditions. Schwarzenegger said the decision is 100% the right move. This will help us beat this terrible virus. The science is unanimous. If we all wear masks, we slow down the spread and can reopen safely. It is not a political issue. Anyone making it a political issue is an absolute moron who can't read. Well, perhaps Arnold Schwarzenegger is an absolute moron who can't read. Because the science on this is not unanimous, and no less than the World Health Organization on several occasions has stated that there is no proof of the efficacy of wearing masks, and masks should be reserved for medical personnel and other caregivers. Mask matters have been rendered political after President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, who've been pushing for a fast restart of the U.S. economy, refused to wear masks in a number of public settings. On Thursday, the Terminator star said wearing masks to stem the spread of COVID-19 shouldn't be a political issue. Look, if Donald Trump said that people should brush their teeth twice a day, this would be made a political issue. If Donald Trump said that fresh orange juice is delicious, this would be made a political issue. Arnold warned on March 15th, stay at home as much as possible and watch my movies. Listen to the experts, ignore the morons. Foreheads in brackets. What? We will get through this together. Apparently we will get through this together by everyone atomizing himself and considering every other person on earth as a grave risk to their lives. That doesn't sound to me like togetherness. So Donald Trump is going ahead with his Tulsa rally, and I'm very glad to see it. He warned Friday that anyone coming to Oklahoma to protest against his campaign rally in Tulsa will not be treated like they have been in other areas of the country. Any protesters, anarchists, agitators, looters, or lowlifes who are going to Oklahoma, please understand you will not be treated like you have been in New York, Seattle, or Minneapolis. It will be a much different scene. Yes, I dare say that it will. The kickoff event to reboot Trump's re-election campaign has been hugely controversial. Public health experts, even some within the Trump administration, such as Dr. Anthony Fauci, have warned that the event could spread the deadly disease, unlike Black Lives Matter's protests, because COVID-19 has agency, and COVID-19 is down with Black Lives Matter. So no need to worry about being exposed to the virus at BLM protests. Yeah, I wanted to talk about a fellow called, let's talk about millennials first. I came across this the other day and I found it absolutely hilarious because, in recent years, it's become very popular to abuse boomers. Boomers are the worst generation in history. Everyone hates boomers. Boomers don't know how to use computers. I don't know where people got that idea. And they're just generally worthless, and they should hurry up and die. Is a story here from Yahoo Life, which suggests that perhaps there is another generation even more hated than the boomers, and that is the millennials. My three children are millennials, so I have some insight into that generation. Kelsey Weekman writes, each generation has its own stereotype. Baby boomers are known for being technologically challenged and intolerant to change. Where does that come from? Millennials are apparently overly sensitive and kill everything. Generation Z is known for its obsession with social media and lack of focus. According to the American Psychological Association, these stereotypes are often wrong and can even be harmful in an age-diverse workplace. Generally, there is tension between the youngest and oldest generations in a shared space, like Gen Z and boomers. But the latest battle in the generational wars is between Gen Z and millennials. A Twitter user called Local Celeb uncovered a series of TikTok comments in which younger users roasted the generation ahead of them. Let's see, they're worried about their Harry Potter house, but they live in a one-bedroom apartment. Y'all worried about the wrong houses. No one. Millennials. I'm such a Hufflepuff. I find it insulting, like I'm not old. And they always say they have a combined house like a Griffin Claw or some, like they miss the whole point. What about the ones who name their kids after video game characters? I told you guys that millennials are canceled this year. And you should say it. Millennials are monsters, and I stand by that. Ugh, odd adulting. I think every generation can agree that millennials were a mistake. Or, I hate adulting. Just give me a slice of pizza and wine. Like sis Rebecca, you are 32 and an alcoholic. Please sit down. My hatred towards millennials is indescribable. Millennials be like, yikes, I'm adulting right now. I need to go get avocado toast. Hashtag adulting. No, the worst is the Gen Z kids who act like millennials. All they do is drink wine, post cringy 90s kid memes, talk about tech startups, and lie. Oh dear. Oh dear. Such hostility. Gen Z users criticize millennials for saying words like doggo and adulting, living in one-bedroom apartments. What? Oversharing their Harry Potter houses, being obsessed with avocado toast. I don't understand this. I read, presumably this was true, I guess this would have been some decades ago, that the avocado industry had been unsuccessful in convincing Americans that this was a delicious fruit or vegetable, whichever it is, and that at the time, something like 2/3 of all avocados eventually became dog food. But then someone invented spreading it on toast, and sure, I'll pay $10 for a piece of bread with avocado paste on it. Yeah, all right. So, I don't know. What do people think about millennials? I feel rather sorry for them, actually, because they've been intolerably educated, badly educated. Their heads have been filled with nonsense right from the very beginning. And they've been told, your life is going to be rubbish. But how about Harry Potter? How about the Hunger Games? How about, consume brands? Intellectual property is your religion. As I say, I feel sorry for them. And, the argument is made that they're far too sensitive, that they burst into tears at the slightest provocation. Well, who made them that way? Well, their parents made them that way, didn't they? That the millennials were raised by helicopter parents. No, we can't let you do something on your own because we can't be auditing whatever it is you're doing. And is what you're doing, is that going to get you into a better college? Is this a proper use of your time? Everything has to be formal. No informal arrangements allowed. Oh, you want to get together with a bunch of friends and play baseball? I'm sorry, is this a registered league? Who's in charge of it? Where's your literature? Are there insurance waivers that I need to sign? Let's see. Gen X gang is best gang, says Octopus Knight. John S. says Generation Bushmeat. Brandon Smith says everyone hates their generation. I don't know. I've been hearing that. Actually, I suppose there's a lot of truth to that. But again, I talked about the difference before between the old millennials and the young millennials. And from the time that I was a teenager, all of this peace, love, dope stuff and Woodstock and sitting in a giant mud pile with 500,000 people. So what's wrong with them? This is disgusting. And their constant praise of themselves as the best generation in history. And why? Based on what? What was actually accomplished? Well, that you listened to cool music and smoked herb? Those aren't really accomplishments, Oh, we stopped the Vietnam War. Oh, did you now? I guess Bill Clinton thinks so. Okay, let's see. Brandon Smith says blaming boomers is like chickens blaming their ancestors instead of the farmer. Again, I was taught a whole bunch of stupid things when I was young in school. And, through the media, essentially that all people were the same everywhere in the world. We're all the same under the skin, that there are no significant differences between different types of people, that there are no significant differences between men and women. It wasn't the boomers who introduced this nonsense. It was the greatest generation and the silent generation. Edward Richardson says, my millennial daughter made avocado toast today. Millennials, most screwed generation. They will inherit massive social security debt. They may have liked Twilight, but which gen were the Twilight moms? I don't know. We keep hearing about how future generations are going to inherit this massive debt or various kinds of massive debt. I don't believe that's true, because the debt is going to be canceled long before that happens. Nobody, if the people in charge, and I'm talking about our rulers for the last couple of decades, if they seriously believed that they would have to pay back the money that they've borrowed, they wouldn't have borrowed the money in the first place. Nobody thinks that money is going to be paid back. This is an interesting story. I was talking about civilizational collapse this week, and this preys on my mind that I'm reading about a book, The Fall of the Roman Empire, which I'm going to be talking about on the book club next week. And things which were commonplace get forgotten. The tools, the knowledge needed to preserve civilization, this gets lost. As David Mamet said, what one man can do, another man can do. But in decadent societies, that is no longer true. This is a story from 2 days ago in Ars Technica. California utility firm Pacific Gas and Electric pleaded guilty on Tuesday to charges that it was responsible for the deaths of more than 80 people in a massive 2018 wildfire caused by its equipment. The fire, known as the Camp Fire, began in November 2018 when two PG&E power lines came into contact with nearby dry brush, sparking flames. 85 people died in the fire, which also destroyed 18,800 structures. But that's just property. Nobody cares about property. Hasn't Black Lives Matter taught us anything? Months of investigation by state and federal authorities found that PG&E had for years failed to conduct maintenance on the power lines that failed, according to the report published by the Butte County District Attorney's Office. In March, the district attorney filed an indictment charging PG&E with 85 felony counts, one for unlawfully causing a fire, and 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter. At first glance, this looks like the sort of crime that someone or some people actually might go to prison for. PG&E, quote, had a legal duty to the public to avoid wildfires and failed to perform that legal duty by recklessly failing to maintain and operate its electrical lines and equipment in a manner that would minimize the risk of catastrophic wildfires posed by those electrical lines and equipment, resulting in the Camp Fire. Each of the 84 manslaughter counts reads. Company president and CEO Bill Johnson entered the guilty plea in court yesterday on behalf of the company. Our equipment started the fire that destroyed the towns of Paradise and Concow and severely burned Magalia and other parts of Butte County, Johnson said on behalf of PG&E. I apologize for the pain we have caused. As part of its plea agreement, the company agreed to pay a $3.5 million fine. What? That's it? And an additional $500,000 to cover the costs of the investigation. A federal judge on Tuesday approved the company's $59 billion reorganization plan. Hang on just 1 second, please. Okay. $59 billion reorganization plan. That plan includes settlements with insurers and local governments, as well as $13.5 billion in settlements to victims of wildfires for which PG&E was responsible. This sort of thing is deeply worrying to me because it's just, it's a procedure, it's a process that power lines are supposed to be inspected on a regular basis. And so you simply, you make a rota that people And you can specify these people are going to these sites on these days to do inspections. And of course, it's characteristic of a decadent society where companies like PG&E just decide, nah, these inspections, they're a pain in the ass. You got to drive to the middle of nowhere, and crawl around in this dead landscape and look at a bunch of wires and all that. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Well, we've seen what's the worst that can happen. Let's see. I was alerted by someone who follows me on Twitter, Space Cowboy NJ. Someone had praised Edward G. Robinson in the movie Soylent Green. Edward G. Robinson, one of my favorite actors. Paul Ehrlich of the Population Bomb fame could have written Soylent. So many of these 70s future disaster flicks became the media reality. Population Bomb, Ozone Hole, Global Cooling, Warming, Virus. Camille Paglia psychoanalyzing this apocalyptic fetish, and brilliantly so, in my humble opinion. Camille Paglia wrote 50s science fiction films, 70s disasters films such as The Towering Inferno have been blamed on international political tensions and anxieties. I disagree. Dreams of disaster will always appear when benevolent Rousseauism is in the air. The liberal 60s, identifying sex and nature with love and peace, produced the Sadian counter-reaction of the 70s catastrophism. The present preoccupation with nuclear apocalypse is also crypto-religious. Fear of world holocaust is another self-haunting, a way to subordinate the self to the cosmos in an era of easy, all-forgiving therapies and faith. Now, if you go back, you can find this on YouTube. When I had a podcast called The Two Kevins, Kevin Steele used to make these illustrated videos for my movie essays. And he did one for Repo Man. And I noted that, Repo Man is drenched in the paranoia of the nuclear winter. Repo Man is, in a way, kind of a parody of the Mickey Spillane novel that was turned into a very strange disaster movie. I think it's called Kiss Me Deadly. And just let me check. I don't want to mistake here. Yeah, Kiss Me Deadly. So Reaper Man is a kind of a parody of Kiss Me Deadly. And so Kiss Me Deadly, the movie at least, is drenched in nuclear terror, as is Repo Man. But we see, I remember the 80s well. There was this baleful Australian physician called Helen Caldecott who toured the world dispensing apocalypse porn. I don't know, we were all going to melt. We're all going to turn into mutants. We're all going to die screaming in agony for weeks before we finally perish, etc. No one was safe. Now, strangely enough, Ronald Reagan actually wanted peace in the world. He wanted an agreement on nuclear weapons with the Soviet Union. He wanted a great reduction in the number of nuclear weapons. Despite this, he was caricatured as Ronnie Reagan. He wanted to destroy the world, though he did not want to destroy the world. He initiated nuclear control talks with Chairman Gorbachev of the Soviet Union, and the conservatives called him a traitor. They called him a traitor to America and suggested that he was perhaps a communist himself. Well, the talks were a success, and the nuclear winter horror, it vanished really quickly. So, wow, that's a huge burden off our backs. No, but apparently we want a burden, and guess what we get immediately after the wane of the nuclear winter terror? We get the climate terror, where apparently the seas are going to start boiling, and the Earth is going to be terraformed into Venus, and we're all going to die. We're all going to die because the temperature is going to rise 2 degrees Celsius? That doesn't make any sense. As a general principle, warm is better than cold. I live in a country which, in terms of temperature and size, it's the second coldest country in the world after Russia. An average 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperature would be a boon to Canada. It would mean a longer growing season, for instance. It would mean fewer people dying in the winters. It would mean less expenditure of carbon-based fuels to keep us warm. It's just a win, win, win. But Canada has been in the leadership of the climate terror. In fact, the Liberal Party and the media and the elite, they act as if that, carbon has always been man's deadliest enemy. And I think this does have it is a perverted religious expression. C.S. Lewis once wrote that the worst will have come when people no longer believe in God, but they still believe in the devil. And that's where we are right now. Who's the devil? Well, racism is the devil. Sexism is the devil. Homophobia and transphobia are the devil. But climate change or climate emergency, climate extinction, that is the devil. And we must destroy our economies in order to combat this great evil. Well, strangely enough, it never really caught on because, year after year goes by and people ask themselves, not unreasonably, when does it start to get, really warm, too warm? How come I haven't noticed this? And they say, weather is not climate. Actually, over time, weather is climate. And so the attempt to terrorize people into enabling experts to transform the world and destroy the economy, it didn't work. But then in 2020, a virus from China appears. And so the experts tell us that we must destroy the world's economies. We must totally atomize society, and we must suppress basic civil liberties because otherwise everyone is going to die. And guess what? We put up with it. We allowed it to happen. Now, people will say, that's not fair. We didn't allow it to happen. Oh, I don't know. If people are angry enough about something, I guess they go out into the streets, don't they? And we've seen that in recent weeks. And we've seen mobs of people protesting, looting, burning, attacking people, killing them. But this is righteous anger. And these are mostly peaceful protests. And woe betide you if you do not celebrate Black Lives Matter. I was talking, earlier this week about some Vietnamese American reality show star who was canned from her show. And one of the reasons was apparently that her devotion to Blackout Tuesday was not sufficient. But I think that the climate extinction following upon the nuclear winter and the other scares, they're an expression of guilt, of religious regret, that we know deep down that our society is rotten and that we live largely pointless lives, consuming, seeking endless pleasure and new forms of perverted pleasure, maximizing our utility, as the economists like to say, and so that we must be punished as a result. Few people believe in hell anymore, so the punishment has to come from nature. There's a politician in my country. His name is Jagmeet Singh. It's spelled Jagmeet, but it is pronounced Jagmeet. Why it's not spelled Jagmeet, this transliteration of foreign languages, it's something of a bête noire of mine. But as it turns out, this fellow, he's born in 1979. He's the leader of the New Democratic Party. And the New Democratic Party used to be the working class party in Canada. It's now the Faculty Club Party. It simply stands for Identity Politics. Curiously, Jagmeet Singh is not his actual name. All Sikhs, of which he is one, must have the name Singh. Somewhere in their name, Singh means lion. His actual surname is Dalawal, and that's a very common Sikh name. And there's a lot of Dalawals in British Columbia. And for years, he was known as Jimmy Dalawal. But then he decided to style himself as Jagmeet Singh, I guess for purposes of greater authenticity. He observes the 7 Ks. He has a long beard, unshorn beard, and he wears a turban. He is known for his colorful turbans. He's also known for his smile, which involves a great number of teeth, an ocean of teeth. I thought that it was unlikely that he would be elected leader of the New Democratic Party because his appearance is fearsome. He looks like a cartoon villain. Another problem with him as a party leader is, yes, Canada is on the road to becoming a minority country, but that is not to say that all these minorities like each other. And the Sikhs rub a lot of other minorities the wrong way, particularly the Chinese. In fact, in the election last year, the New Democratic Party seats were roughly cut in half. So my prediction was right, that Jagmeet Singh was a poor choice as leader. Before he became an MP, he was an MPP, Member of Provincial Parliament, in Ontario from 2011 to 2017. And he has particular interest in his home country of India. He was born in 1979, as I mentioned, and his parents had come from the Punjab, where most of the Sikhs live. And they'd come there a few years earlier. So his family has been in this country for, I don't know, roughly over half a century. But he doesn't seem to identify as a Canadian, actually. He is obsessed with what the Sikhs call Khalistan, which is the name for their homeland that they, after they win their independence from India. And such is his commitment to the Khalistani cause that Jagmeet Singh is banned from entering India. When he was in the Ontario Provincial Parliament, he proposed a private member's bill which would accuse India of committing genocide in the Punjab. He called Canadians racists and Canada a racist country during the 2019 election, and I thought, probably not so wise. Probably not wise for a man with that name, looking as he does, telling the majority that they are bad people. But he is in the news again, and he has become a hero to various people because of the question of racism in Canada. That Canada is apparently systemically racist and always has been. And the commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police is in serious difficulty because she originally would not assent to the proposition that the RCMP had a culture of systemic racism. She later made the groveling apology. We'll see whether she will keep her job. But Jagmeet Singh was attempting to bully the House of Commons into agreeing with the motion that, yes, Canada is systemically racist. So this is a story from Yahoo News. Tensions continued in the House of Commons between Jagmeet Singh and the Bloc Québécois on Thursday, a day after the NDP leader called Bloc MP Alain Thériault a racist and refused to apologize. Singh directed the comment at Tarian on Wednesday, after the House of Commons failed to receive unanimous consent to pass a New Democrat motion on systemic racism in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Singh said Tarian looked at him after voicing his disapproval, then brushed his hand to dismiss the motion, which the NDP leader described as the face of racism. Now, Indians as a rule, and Sikhs in particular, are exceedingly race conscious. Sikhism is not a proselytizing religion, so that is to say that almost all Sikhs are Punjabis. And for a person such as this to be lecturing Canadians on racism, on what they may say and what they may not say, it's deeply offensive. But of course, these immigrants and their cohorts, they don't believe that Canada had a history until they showed up. They are citizens of convenience, or paper citizens. That gesture represents what racism is, that the people don't matter, that their lives don't matter. Well, we know that Black lives matter. As for the rest of us, apparently we don't matter so much. It was symbolic of what we're up against when we're trying to challenge systemic racism. Policing that has caused violence and death to Indigenous and Black people needs to stop. And that's why the gesture to me represented exactly what Indigenous, Black, and racialized people feel every day, that they do not matter. Okay, so we have Indigenous people, Black people, and then racialized people. This is hard to keep up with, because I thought that we had racialized, evil white people had racialized everyone who wasn't white. Of course, whites are not a race, and race doesn't exist, but I am going to have to stop before I get dizzy. The Bloc is seeking an apology from Singh, who was dismissed from the Commons' normal sitting on Wednesday for refusing to apologize when asked to by the Speaker. They've also denied the use of the gesture that Singh described, which was not caught on camera. Well, the rule is that the cameras in the House of Commons are focused on the Speaker, who's ever speaking at the time. There's a lot of embarrassing stuff that goes on in the House of Commons. People falling asleep, mouths hanging open, people being drunk, coming back from lunch drunk and whatever. So there are strict rules on who is on camera. When Singh on Thursday stood to ask questions in the Commons chamber during a meeting of the special COVID-19 committee, Bloc MP Claude de Bellefeuille objected and asked Speaker Anthony Rota to not allow Singh to be recognized and speak because he had not apologized. Rota allowed Singh to ask his questions since this expulsion happened while the House of Commons was sitting normally on Wednesday. Thursday's sitting was under a special committee, therefore it operated under different rules. Despite the explanation, the three Bloc MPs who were present decided to leave the chamber as Singh began to speak. Yes, there's a rule in parliaments that you're not allowed to grossly insult people in this way, and if you do so, you must apologize. And people are now carrying on as if this is a ridiculous rule. It is not a ridiculous rule. The reason why people are forced to apologize is because they don't want to return to the situation of the past where fistfights and the like regularly broke out in parliamentary assemblies. Let's see, all the power to Jagmeet Singh. Canadians Prime Minister defend NDP leader who called Bloc MP racist. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the Bloc Québécois' actions disappointing and problematic a day after NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was asked to leave the House of Commons for calling an MP racist. Trudeau did not say if he thought the action of the Bloc was racist, despite being asked multiple times. Instead, he once again admitted to Canadians at his daily press conference that systemic discrimination and racism exists in the RCMP and in Canada, while showing support for Singh's choice to speak out. I think it is important that we recognize that racialized Canadians whose lived reality, as opposed to the virtual reality of non-racialized Canadians, and microaggression all too often are allowed to make people uncomfortable in bringing out these issues. Once again, it's like that 6'1" Black woman at Tom Toll's party. Oh, she is the one who felt uncomfortable as she's screaming abuse at a smaller woman who's twice her age? I don't think so. Because in my country, racism. Oh, what? Racism? What? Quiet, quiet, quiet. Someone's lecturing us about our racism. Yeah, much to do. Much, much, much to do. I will mention again that in all of these stories about Canada's systemic racism, it turns out that there is only one group that may be legally discriminated against in Canada, and that is white men. Peter MacKay, a former cabinet minister who's running for the Conservative leadership, his father, Elmer MacKay, was a cabinet minister and a close friend of Brian Mulroney. And Brian Mulroney is the ultra-conservative, extreme right-winger who gave us affirmative action in 1986. And the drafters of our risibly named Charter of Rights and Freedoms had anticipated this by protecting such systemic racism, because that's what it is, in the Constitution. Section 15 of the Constitution, equality rights. 1, every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. That seems clear, doesn't it? Subsection 2. Subsection 1 does not preclude any law, program, or activity that has as its object the amelioration of conditions of disadvantaged individuals or groups, including those that are disadvantaged because of race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental and physical disability. So Canadians are all equal. Yeah, but they're not. Some are more equal than others. And minorities, the protected categories, they are the most equal of all. But this never gets mentioned in any of these stories about systemic racism. Why do we have affirmative action for minorities, including minorities that were never even here until the day before yesterday, if we're systemically racist? Why does Canada have as its policy making white people a minority if Canada is systemically racist? These questions, I suppose they're not going to be answered, so they are not asked. I'm going to move on to the book club very shortly. I see that my old friend, Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, is in the news again. There's a column by Rick Bell at the Calgary Sun. Kenney shuns Alberta separatism, says he's a patriot. I find that very amusing because if Jason Kenney were asked where he was from, he could say, like Newt Gingrich, nowhere. Because Jason Kenney was not born in Alberta, was not raised in Alberta, did not come there until he was an adult. Jason Kenney is a rootless cosmopolite. He's a citoyen du monde. But he's talking tough with Ottawa. But it's all a sham. Oh, there will be a referendum on equalization, but a yes vote does not mean Alberta will get what it wants. Besides, the vote is not until the fall of 2021. This is also written into our Constitution that the so-called have-not provinces must get enormous amounts of money from the have provinces, which means that the provinces of Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan are looted such that provinces like Quebec can have welfare systems which are richer than they have in Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. They have $5 a day daycare in Quebec, and this is paid for largely by the people of Alberta. Now, of course, Alberta has no money now. Saskatchewan has no money. British Columbia has no money. Exactly how equalization is supposed to work under these conditions has not been explained, and our media does not seem to be interested in this. So Jason Kenney, he said, I am a Canadian patriot, and I believe the vast majority of Albertans in their hearts are patriots. I don't believe patriotism can be qualified. You can't put conditions on love of country. You either have it or you don't. Rick Bell says, and what has all this patriotism, this love of country got us? Maybe the Premier could get the Ottawa elites to show a little of that patriotism. While he's sharing, Kenney also thinks there's no smart leverage in making threats you can't or won't keep. You see, he's already saying right from the start that, that Ottawa can just ignore what he's saying. Threats only have power if they're credible. And when you have the Premier of a province that said, separation is off the table. If separation is off the table, what can Alberta do? Well, it could vote for the Conservative Party and not the Liberal Party, as it did in the last election. That makes no difference whatsoever, just like voting for the Reform Party and the Canadian Alliance made no difference. Without a credible threat of separatism, Ottawa can simply afford to laugh at Jason Kenney, because what is he going to do about it? He's going to do nothing. And apparently the price of Confederation is that Alberta gets raped continually and then says, more please, can I have another? Okay, so on to the book club. The book that we are discussing today is called The Man in the High Castle. And it is set in 1962, which is the year that it was published, and it is by Philip Kindred Dick. Dick, I was talking yesterday about Rainer Werner Fassbinder and his prodigious output. Fassbinder was a drug addict, a conspicuous user of cocaine and barbiturates. Philip Kindred Dick's output is really rather astounding. He died at the age of 53. He began writing for pulps, science fiction magazines, on cheap science fiction magazines. This did not pay very well. So he had to write and write and write and write. And he used amphetamines to give himself the energy for this constant writing. Now, this led to, how should we put this, a distortion in his personality. Now, to what extent Dick's weirdness or his insanity can be blamed on drugs is an open question, because the nature of reality is central to Dick's oeuvre, and it is central to The Man in the High Castle. Dick's work is largely about, identity and the extent to which one can control reality, or at least one can control one's own reactions to reality. And I mean, this is obviously a very profound subject. Philip K. Dick had perhaps the greatest imagination of any writer I could think of. The first short story that he sold for money was called Rogue. And he wrote this when he was 22. And it's about a dog who imagined that the garbage men who came every Friday morning were stealing valuable food, which the family had carefully stored away in a safe metal container. It's called Rogue because the dog was outraged by what it considered to be the theft from its owners, and it would bark in outrage, Rogue, Rogue. But no one paid any attention to the dog. Now, you see, his very first effort is an attempt to understand a different kind of consciousness, a dog's consciousness. Because as Tom Wolfe explained in his essay, Sorry But Your Soul Just Died, dogs understand about 50 concepts, and most of them are very simple. I only learned a few years ago that the reason that dogs make such a fuss when their owners come back, from work or whatever, is because dogs lack the intelligence to recognize that pattern, that the man who feeds me leaves, but he always comes back. Each time the man leaves, the dog thinks, well, what am I going to do now? Who's going to feed me now? Hence the joy, the exuberance when the man who feeds him shows up again. Now, the Man in the High Castle is an alternative history novel about an alternative history novel, which is very meta, as they say. In this alternative history, the Axis has lost World War II. So on the Pacific coast, Washington, Oregon, and California are occupied by the Japanese. And the Northeast and upper Midwest are occupied by Germany. And you have the Rocky Mountain states in between, which are sort of a neutral zone, although they can't be, they've been Finlandized, if you recognize that reference. And you have the South, which is not really discussed, except the characters in it don't seem to like the South much. I should warn people that there are certain forbidden words that occur in this novel. So if you are sensitive in that respect, probably best not to read it. Now, we have in this book various characters who are struggling with the conditions of the occupation. That Dick has clearly made a very serious study of Japanese culture. And if nothing else, this book is valuable for what it teaches us about the Japanese way of thinking. I suppose I used to believe, like many people do, that the Japanese have such a formal code of conduct because they are not prone to deep feeling. And this book helped me realize that the reason why Japanese conduct is so codified is because the Japanese are, in fact, intentionally emotional people. And the code exists to restrain them. But the 20th century, of course, was supposed to be the American century. And in this novel, it's not the American century, it is the German or the Japanese century. In fact, in the novel, the Germans have drained the Mediterranean and turned it into farmland. The Germans have conquered the moon and even Mars. The Germans have rocket ships which can travel from Europe to San Francisco in 45 minutes. Hitler is dead in the novel, and he has been replaced by Martin Bormann. But there is a succession crisis because Bormann is old and ill. And to a large extent, the fate of the world depends upon who will succeed Martin Bormann as the chancellor. So we have characters in San Francisco, and we have characters in the mountain states. Robert, or R. Childen, he owns an antique shop in San Francisco, which deals in Americana. And the Japanese are obsessed with Americana. And but of course, this question of what is real is manifested in many different ways in this book. That Childen is horrified when he discovers that a antique occult revolver which he has sold is in fact a fake. And these fakes are made by this company called Wyndham Matson. And one of the other main characters, Frank, he works for this company until he is fired and sets up on his own. Now, Frank's actual surname is Fink, and he's a Jew. And he is terrified of anyone knowing about this because the Germans will attempt to have him extradited so that he can be murdered. So Frink is in disguise throughout the novel. Childen is in disguise as well because he muses on what is it that makes something real, that there is a history there, that various people touched such an item, or they saw such an item. But actually, how does that make something real? That people pay enormous amounts of money for things that have little intrinsic value. It's the historical value of this. And this is brought home to him forcefully when he discovers that, it's likely that much of this, the Americana market, or perhaps most of the Americana market, is actually made up of fakes. Now, the character Bob Childen has deeply immersed himself in Japanese culture, and he believes that he understands the concept of place, of one's place, of proper place. But it is deeply humiliating for him to kowtow to the Japanese. That there is no question that the Japanese are the superiors and the Americans are the inferiors. Now, inferior still are the Chinese, who are called by a rude name. And the Chinese in Japanese-occupied California are little more than slaves. Now, we have Frank's ex-wife, Juliana. She is in Colorado. She has left her husband, and she has left her husband because he didn't make enough money. I guess he wasn't aspirational enough. And Philip K. Dick is very good on this. That is in the nature of women to want security, to want a man who is a somebody, to want a man who's important in some way and who brings home the bacon. Juliana is she is a deeply sensuous woman. Well, this is another way of saying that she's a tart, actually. She is very attractive to men, and and vice versa, and she yields to this frequently. Frank blames himself because he wasn't enough of a man to keep this fine woman, and he starts a business himself, which is creating, if you will, real fake Americana, original, high quality jewelry. Now, you think when you look at this question, the kinds of things that are considered Americana now, that one goes to special stores to buy, or one bids for online or in an auction house, they were once just ordinary items. And so what Frank and his partner are doing is they've created a business that are going to create ordinary items, which perhaps one day will be considered antiques, because every antique was simply an ordinary item at one point. Fakery in the novel. We have a character, a Swede, supposedly, who's called Baines, who has come on a secret mission, and he is not who he purports to be. We have an Italian truck driver who takes up with an Italian ex-soldier called Joe Sinadella. He is not who he appears to be. And we have the man in the high castle himself, who has written a book of alternative history in which the Allies win the war. His name is Hawthorne Abinson, and the book is called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, which is a quotation from the book of Ecclesiastes. But running through all of these characters is their devotion to the I Ching. And Abinson consulted the I Ching while writing his historical novel. And Philip K. Dick himself consulted the I Ching while writing The Man in the High Castle. And it is, I'll just read here from Wikipedia, originally a divination manual in the Western Zhou period. Over the course of the Warring States period and early Imperial period, it was transformed into a cosmological text with a series of philosophical commentaries known as the 10 Wings. The I Ching uses a type of divination called kleromancy, which produces apparently random numbers. 6 numbers between 6 and 9 are turned into a hexagram, which can then be looked in the I Ching book, arranged in an order known as the King Wen sequence. The interpretation of the readings found in the I Ching is a matter of centuries debate, and many commentators have used the book symbolically, often to provide guidance for moral decision-making as informed by Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. The hexagrams themselves have often acquired cosmological significance and been paralleled with many other traditional names for the processes of change, such as yin and yang and wu xing. Now, it's a very fatalistic philosophy that you consult the I Ching about your fortune in general or about a specific decision, and it gives gnomic advice about this. And I suppose the lesson of the I Ching is that there is a harmony in nature or in the cosmos, that you harm yourself if you seek to act in disharmony. Now, of course, this is a pagan, superstitious, very fatalistic notion. But The Man in the High Castle is it's a pessimistic and fatalistic novel. I mean, any novel in which Joseph Goebbels becomes the Chancellor of Germany can hardly be described as optimistic. But everything converges on San Francisco in this, because there are, layers within layers. And there is, the Germans in the novel have pretty much genocided the entire population of Africa. And there is the suggestion that the Germans have had enough of the Japanese. The Germans want all of the world for themselves, and so they intend to genocide the Japanese as well. It's curious to me that Philip K. Dick makes a very strong distinction between the Germans and the Japanese in terms of wickedness. He notes, or one of the characters notes, that the Japanese don't seem to have anything against the Jews in particular. Philip K. Dick was clearly seduced by Japanese culture, but of course anyone who knows anything about the World War II and the years before it, that the Japanese were noted for their exceptional cruelty to prisoners of war and to the peoples that they conquered. That if you read testimonies, court testimonies of people charged with war crimes against POWs, say, where you can see it in that movie, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, that the Japanese soldiers who were convicted of war crimes, they were genuinely baffled as to why they were even charged. Because as far as they saw it, anyone who does not fight to the death is a coward and has forfeited all reasonable treatment, all humane treatment. Other peoples don't see it quite that way. But what I was somewhat disturbed by this, in that Dick in this novel is somewhat idealizing he's very much idealizing Japanese culture. And he was asked about the novel. The ending of the novel is rather, mysterious, one might say. And he was asked about writing a sequel to it. And he said, to jump back into the whole Nazi world, it would have been too much for him. And, one understands, why he felt this. Because Dick spent a lot of time, did a lot of research for this, and a lot of it was reading about Nazi Germany, which is a very distressing subject. So you have a host of characters who are seeking change. They're seeking transformation. And the question is raised is whether it is wise for them to seek this transformation. Perhaps they should just accept who they are, what their state is, because of the suggestion, the fatalist suggestion that there's really nothing that they can do about it. And the novel is very impressive in showing the interior lives of very, very different people, including Japanese characters as well. That we are introduced to a Japanese trade representative who is a devotee of Americana, of ancient guns, the kind that one has to load. And it turns out, and this becomes a significant plot point, that he has actually become rather good at not only loading but firing this weapon, and he becomes this rather minor or sort of medium Japanese bureaucrat, becomes a real life action hero, and the Italian, as it were, a truck driver. It turns out that he was once an action hero, and he means again to be an action hero. And whether he will succeed or not, of course, is central to the ending of the novel. I really like this book for many reasons, not least because it is the kind of novel that really inspires reflection on different cultures, on the nature of reality, the nature of consciousness. That this sounds banal, but it happens to be true, and it's really important. That reality exists, but what we see as reality is only filtered through our own consciousness. Now, one can say that, well, there are third-party accounts. One doesn't have to rely on one's eyes and ears. No, there are third-party accounts. But, any books, say, that we read about any subject, they're filtered through our own consciousness, and our own consciousness solely, because we can't filter this through anyone else's consciousness, which means that every person is unique, not just, unique in a physical way, but we have billions of people on Earth who are all looking at the world in different ways, in uniquely different ways. And I suppose this is a subject that scares people because, people who are rationalists, they talk about their facts and logic. Well, so-called facts and logic are interpreted by various people in various ways. And as I said, this is at the heart of Dick's work, and it was at the heart of his life, because he became obsessed with the idea that one could, in a way, change reality by interpreting it in a different way. And this led to I suppose that and the drugs led to a psychotic break, which eventually led to his conversion to Christianity, strangely enough. I highly recommend this book. And I saw a few episodes of the Amazon series based on it, and then I stopped watching it. Probably not a good idea to watch the Amazon series before you read this book, because this is the definitive text. And it is it is an excellent book, even aside from the ingeniousness of its plot. In fact, I don't think, I don't know that the novel really needs the alternative history. I mean, it could certainly get along without it, but it is a significant addition to it. And one is led through the lives of these characters, and this sense of status or of place, as the Japanese call it, is standard. It's just throughout. It's woven deeply into this book. And that we all seem to be kowtowing to someone or other. That life is a series of it's just endless compromises, and that people seek things from others, and so they must seek to please them. And some people manage this better than others. I suppose Juliana is the character who manages this best of all. She has to engage in some rather terrifying behavior in order to come through on the other side. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Man in the High Castle, and I will get back to the chat. Kevin, what does the ending mean to you? I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, the author of the author seems to be saying that, it is what it is. It will be what it will be. And, there are greater forces at work. I suppose there's a tendency among men to think that I am the man who is going to change history. Now, I would disagree with the view that Tolstoy put forward in War and Peace, that, great men mean nothing. But on the other hand, for any man to become truly great, to accomplish great or terrible things, there's a whole host of other conditions that must be present. Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. If the Democrats had run a candidate that was less nasty and corrupt than Hillary Clinton, would Trump have won? Probably not. But, that's the way of the world. 5 years is nothing in a man's life except when he is very young and very old. So true. That is from MCT. Epictetus said exactly the same thing. I talked about Epictetus on the book club, a year ago or so. I'm quite attracted to the Stoicism, philosophy of Stoicism. Stoicism doesn't have to be a pagan philosophy. And it's certainly true, in paring things down to the essentials, that there are certain things that one is responsible for life, and there are certain things that one is not responsible for in life. So one should, as best as possible, concern oneself with the things in life that one truly has control over, which is our words and our deeds. The rest, well, it's up to God or the gods or whatever you believe in. So that's the show for today, the show for this week. Let me give you a heads up on what is coming up culture-wise next week. On Theater Thursday, we are going to be discussing the first 5 episodes of Krzysztof Kieslowski's Decalogue, or the 10 Commandments, which was made for Polish television and was available for many years on really crummy DVDs, but now is out in outstanding editions, both in the United States and in Britain on Blu-ray. And on the book club next week, and I alluded to this earlier, we are going to be talking about The Fate of Rome by Kyle Harper, which is a revolutionary work, because it looks at the collapse of the Roman Empire in largely non-political terms, in terms of ecology, climate, warmth, coldness. The author argues that for roughly 200 years, the ecological conditions in Rome were ideal for an empire that conquered most of the known world. And then after 180 AD, beginning with the Antonine Plague, and many plagues were to follow, the conditions for the further survival of the empire gradually fell away. Thanks a lot for listening to the show. I'll be back on the air Monday. If you like the show or any part of it, I would greatly appreciate it if you would press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already. If you would like to donate to this venture, my PayPal account is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And I will leave you for this week with my traditional benediction and farewell. In these times of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that my dear listeners manage to forge some genuine human connection in order to keep going, to thrive. Good night.